These trucks aren't just big, they're monsters on wheels. V12 engines, insane torque, and enough power to move mountains. Here are the 7 most hardcore V12 trucks the world has ever seen. Number 7. The Mack V12 Superliner. Yeah, baby, this ain't no grocery getter. This is a rollin' thunderstorm with chrome stacks. See, the Superliner was already a beast of a truck in stock form. But then some wild-eyed diesel junkies decided, you know what this highway battleship needs? A V12 Detroit diesel the size of a living room. And boom, the V12 Mack Superliner was born. We're talking a custom rig that could haul America's ego coast to coast without even downshifting. Now let me paint a picture here. You're cruising down I-80, sipping coffee that's hotter than the surface of the sun, and you hear it. That low, guttural rumble behind you, like God himself clearing his throat. You look in the rear view, and there it is, a Mack Superliner with a V12, grill shining, stacks belching black smoke like it's auditioning for a role in Mad Max. That's not just a truck, folks. That's mechanical intimidation on 18 wheels. The V12 Detroit diesel isn't exactly subtle. It doesn't whisper, it doesn't hum, it roars. It shakes windows, rattles fill-ins, and lets every Prius driver know, hey buddy, you picked the wrong lane. It's the kind of engine that doesn't ask if you want to merge. It commands traffic to get out of the way. Highway Patrol probably just sighed when they saw one roll by. What are they gonna do? Pull over a V12 Mack? Good luck catching it before the coffee in your cup holder turns into butter. And the sheer torque, oh Lord. These rigs could tow the moon closer to Earth if NASA cut them a check. Farmers, loggers, haulers, they didn't just use these trucks, they worshipped them. Because when you've got 12 cylinders of pure Detroit iron under your right foot, you don't drive, you command the asphalt. These custom monsters weren't for the faint of heart. They guzzle diesel like frat boys guzzle cheap beer. Fuel economy? Forget about it. You measured miles per gallon in smiles per gallon. And yeah, your wallet cried at every fill-up, but your heart sang every time that V12 barked to life. So what is the Mack V12 Superliner really? It's not just a truck. It's a rolling symbol of American brute force, mechanical insanity, and go big or go home attitude. It's proof that sometimes too much power is just enough. And if you ever saw one barreling down the highway, you knew you weren't just looking at a rig, you were looking at a legend. Number 6. Imagine you're in post-World War II Britain, and the country's got warehouses full of Rolls-Royce Meteor V12 engines, basically detuned versions of the mighty Merlin V12 that powered the Spitfire fighter planes. Now, what do you do with a pile of leftover tank engines? If you said, well, duh, let's shove them into trucks and let her rip, congratulations, you'd fit right in with the mad lads of the late 1940s. These weren't your garden variety delivery vans, oh no. These were torque monsters with war hero DNA. The Meteor V12 was designed to push a 40-ton tank across mud, snow, and whatever battlefield was unlucky enough to get in the way. Drop that bad boy into a lorry, and suddenly you've got a truck that could probably tow Stonehenge into downtown London just for laughs. Now picture this, some poor bloke driving his little Austin with 40 horsepower, sweating bullets to get up a hill, when suddenly, whoosh, a Meteor-powered truck blasts past, sounding like a squadron of angry Spitfires chasing a Luftwaffe over the channel. Forget horsepower, my guy. These things had horse armies. We're talking 600-plus ponies, all stomping their hooves in unison, and torque numbers so big they probably broke the calculator. And let me tell ya, these rigs weren't built for comfort. This wasn't about smooth rides or sipping tea on the motorway. Nah. This was about strapping a jet-age war engine under your cab and holding on for dear life while your teeth rattled out Morse code. The driver's manual probably just said, Step 1, pray. Step 2, don't lift your foot until you've reached Scotland. But oh, the bragging rights. Imagine pulling into a truck stop, some guy boasting about his 120-horse Bedford, and then you stroll in, wipe the grease off your hands and casually mention, yeah, mine's got a Spitfire in it. Boom, conversation over. You're the king of the lorry park. The only problem? Fuel economy. These Meteors drank petrol like it was the end of the world and the pumps were free. A full tank might get you from London to, well, maybe London. But who cared? When your throttle pedal was basically a summon thunder switch, you didn't ask how much it cost. You just grinned like a madman and let it roar. So, what do we call these Meteor trucks? Not just transportation, not just hot rodding. These were rolling exclamation points. Proof that sometimes the best way to recycle is to slap a war engine into a civilian frame and say, good luck, boys. They were part tank, part truck, part Spitfire, and 100% insane. In short, the Rolls-Royce Meteor V12 trucks weren't built to haul groceries. They were built to haul history, horsepower, and a whole lot of attitude. And honestly, that's the kind of madness the open road was made for. Number 5. The Mercedes-Benz NG V12 diesel. This wasn't just a truck, it was a rolling iron chancellor, a steel juggernaut from the 1970s that looked at long-haul trucking and said, ja, we're not here to play games, mein Freund. Now, first off, NG stood for Neue Generation, new generation. And let me tell ya, Mercedes wasn't kidding. This rig was like the Autobahn wrapped up in chrome and diesel fumes. And under that mile-long hood, a V12 diesel engine. Yeah, you heard me right. 12 pistons pounding away like a German Oompa band after 6 pints of lager. Forget V8 rumble, this was V12 thunder. And when you fired it up, small villages probably thought Zeus himself was warming up for a lightning storm. This bad boy was built for the kind of long-haul jobs that would make lesser trucks cry into their oil pans. You needed to haul freight across Europe, through the Alps in winter? Boom! The NG V12 was your guy. While other rigs were gasping for breath on mountain passes, this beast just grinned, dropped a gear, and stomped its way up like a Bavarian beer hall bouncer clearing out the drunks. Now, don't get it twisted. This wasn't just raw muscle. It was also German engineering at its most extra. Everything on it was overbuilt. The frame? Strong enough to carry your load, your buddy's load, and maybe half of Berlin if you stacked it on top. The engine? Designed to run until the sun burned out, provided you fed it enough diesel.
And the cab? Let's just say luxury was a relative term. Sure, it wasn't a Cadillac inside, but for a 70s trucker, it was like flying first class compared to the tin can rattlers on the road. But let's keep it real, this rig wasn't exactly subtle. The V12 diesel had a voice, and that voice was loud. Imagine waking up at a truck stop somewhere in Italy, birds chirping, sun rising, and then, blam! Some guy fires up his NG V12. Birds? Gone. Coffee? Spilled. Peace and quiet? Evaporated. That truck let the whole continent know, time to haul freight, baby. And the fuel bill? Forget about it. This thing drank diesel like it was Oktoberfest. You'd pull into a station, fill the tank, and the pump would be like, "Are you sure? That's enough to power a small country." But the German engineers didn't build it for fuel economy. They built it to outlast the road itself. You ran one of these monsters, and it wasn't just you hauling cargo. It was you making a statement. My truck is stronger than your truck, and probably your house too. Here's the kicker. While America was out there with its Mack V12s all chrome and brawn, Germany rolled in with this Mercedes NG V12, all discipline and grit. It didn't need to brag. It didn't need flames painted on the hood. It just rumbled past, stoic as a general, saying, "Yes, I will take your freight, and I will deliver it early." So, to wrap this up, the Mercedes-Benz NG V12 diesel was more than a truck. It was a rolling fortress, a diesel-powered warhorse, a machine that could eat up highways for breakfast and still ask for schnitzel at lunch. If trucks had personalities, this one would have been the serious, square-jawed guy at the bar who never cracked a smile. But when the fight broke out, he'd clear the room without breaking a sweat.
Number 4. One of the rarest, wildest trucking experiments ever to roll out of Scandinavia, the Scania Vabis L140 V12. Now, most of you know Sweden for Volvo, boxy cars, safe as your grandma's living room. But Scania, oh, they were the wild cousin in the family. While everyone else was putting 6 cylinders under their trucks, Scania engineers sat around the fika table, that's Swedish coffee break by the way, and said, "What if we just doubled it?" Boom! Enter the V12 diesel experiment of the 1960s. This beast was basically 2 inline 6s mashed together like a meatball sub on steroids. And boy did it pull. Farmers, loggers, and haulers out in the frozen forests of Sweden swore the L140 could drag a mountain if you hooked it up right. You needed to haul timber the size of redwoods through snow deeper than your car? This truck just laughed, dropped a gear, and said, "Hop on, jag fixa dig," which in Swedish means, "Don't worry, I got this." But here's the thing, with great power comes crazy complexity. The Scania Vabis L140 V12 was like dating a supermodel who also happened to be a rocket scientist. Sure, she was gorgeous and powerful, but buddy, the maintenance bills were no joke. The V12 had parts on parts on parts, and keeping it happy was like trying to babysit 12 screaming toddlers. If one went out of line, the whole party was ruined. American slang time. This truck was a straight-up torque monster, a real pavement-pounding outlaw. But it was also what truckers like to call a wallet wrecker. Every time you thought you were king of the road, bam, something broke, and suddenly you were broke too. And diesel? Forget it. The L140 drank fuel like a sailor on shore leave. You'd roll into a fuel station, and the pump would start sweating, muttering, "Please, not this guy again." Now, don't get me wrong, when it worked, it was a legend. That V12 soundtrack, pure Nordic thunder. Forget the opera, this was Wagner with pistons. Guys would fire it up at dawn, and the whole valley would echo like Thor himself was clearing his throat. If you were lucky enough to see one hauling a load, it wasn't just a truck. It was a rolling Viking warship on wheels. But here's the rub. The cost and complexity killed it. It was just too much truck for most folks. The average Swedish hauler didn't need a nuclear-powered freight train. They needed something reliable, easy to fix, and cheap to run. And the L140 was about as cheap to run as a Las Vegas casino. So Scania said, "All right, that was fun," and pulled the plug. Still, the legend lives on. Today, spotting an L140 V12 is like finding Bigfoot riding a snowmobile. Rare, wild, and guaranteed to make gearheads lose their minds. It's proof that Sweden, land of quiet forests and calm people, once looked at the trucking world and said, "Hold my aquavit, let's build a monster." Number 3. The Detroit Diesel 12V71, better known by its street name, the Screaming Jimmy. And let me tell you, this thing didn't just purr, it hollered. If a cat purrs, this was a whole jungle of lions with megaphones duct taped to their throats. Now, here's the deal. Back in the 1960s through the 1980s, America was all about bigger, louder, meaner machines. And Detroit Diesel looked around and said, "We already got our inline sixes, but you know what? Let's double it. Let's slap 12 cylinders together in a V and make it scream louder than your ex-wife when you forgot your anniversary." Thus, the 12V71 was born. This was a two-stroke diesel V12, pumping out north of 500 horsepower. But honestly, numbers don't do it justice. You didn't hear this thing, you felt it. When a logging truck with a 12V71 came barreling down some muddy backwoods trail, you could hear it 3 towns away, rattling windows, scaring deer, and probably shaking Grandma's dentures off the nightstand. It didn't just run, it announced itself like a rock star kicking open the arena doors. Truckers loved it because it had brute force for days. Hauling timber, pulling steel, dragging tanks on the battlefield. This thing didn't care. The 12V71 was like that buddy who's always down to help you move. Except instead of a pickup truck, he shows up with a bulldozer and says, "Where do you want the whole house?" Now, let's talk about that nickname, Screaming Jimmy. Why screaming? Because these two-stroke Detroits didn't have the deep, lazy rumble of a Cummins or a Cat. Oh no, they sounded like a banshee on a caffeine binge. That high-pitched, relentless whine would echo through the hills and logging camps like the world's angriest trumpet. Guys who drove them went half-deaf, but they didn't care. They wore that noise like a badge of honor. If your Jimmy wasn't screaming, it wasn't running right. Here's the thing though, the 12V71 was also a bit of a diva. Sure, it could pull a mountain, but it guzzled fuel like a frat boy at happy hour. Diesel disappeared faster than cold beer at a tailgate. And maintenance? Let's just say you either needed a good mechanic or a hole not of duct tape. Those two-strokes would run like hell, but when they broke, you better have deep pockets and a strong back. But in its prime, man, nothing compared. In logging country, places like Oregon, Washington, and up in Canada, the sound of a screamin' Jimmy meant business. It was the soundtrack of hard work, grit, and engines that didn't know the word quit. Same thing on the battlefield. These engines powered APCs and military rigs that could plow through mud, sand, or anything else Mother Nature threw their way. American slang time? This thing wasn't just a motor, it was a beast mode button. A no-nonsense, red-blooded, diesel-drinking animal. The kind of engine that didn't just move freight, it declared war on the road itself. And you know what? Even today, decades later, you'll still hear truckers and gearheads say they miss the sound of the Screamin' Jimmy. Because engines today, they're quieter, cleaner, smarter, but not nearly as fun. The 12V71 wasn't about being polite. It was about raising hell and getting the job done.
Number 2. We're about to take a little road trip back to the 1930s, Italy style. And we ain't talking Ferraris, Lambos, or fancy espresso machines. Nope, we're talking about a truck so ahead of its time, it practically invented the idea of too much engine for one vehicle. Enter the Fiat 634N V12 diesel, one of the earliest V12 diesel trucks to ever hit the road. Now picture this, the 1930s. Most trucks back then were buzzing around with little 4-bangers and 6-cylinders, struggling to haul a decent load of potatoes without crying uncle. But Fiat, those Italians said, nah, forget small, we're going full opera mode. And like a tenor hitting a high note, they rolled out the 634N with a V12 diesel engine. That's right, 12 cylinders, diesel-powered, at a time when most folks were still figuring out how to get a car to run reliably without blowing smoke like a chimney. This beast was hauling impossible loads across Europe. Think about it. Cobblestone streets, barely paved roads, horse carts still trotting around, and then here comes this massive steel bruiser with a V12 diesel that sounded like Godzilla gargling espresso. Farmers, bakers, and villagers probably dropped their bread in the street when they saw it roll by. And let's talk about size. This truck was a unit. It was long, heavy, and looked like it was ready to invade Poland all by itself. Back in the day, the 634N was used for everything from military supply convoys to serious industrial hauling. If you had a mountain of steel beams to move, this truck said, "Va bene, load me up, let's party." Now, was it practical? Heck no. This thing drank diesel like an American at a bottomless soda bar. Every trip was basically a race between the load getting delivered and the fuel tank running dry. And with 1930s technology, maintenance wasn't exactly a walk in the piazza. If one of those 12 cylinders decided to throw a tantrum, your local village mechanic probably fainted on the spot. But here's the thing. The Fiat 634N was a pioneer. It showed the world that diesel engines weren't just for trains and ships. They could power road vehicles too, and not just little ones, massive trucks that could move the kind of loads that made horses file a union complaint. This rig wasn't just a truck, it was a trailblazer. The kind of truck that looked at the rules of the road and said, "Nah, I'll make my own." It was the original Italian big rig boss, before truck stops and CB radios were even a thing. And imagine the vibe. While American truckers in the 30s were still babying their rigs down dusty highways, Italian drivers were up there wrestling a 12-cylinder monster through mountain passes, probably yelling, "Mamma mia!" every time the brakes squealed. That's not just trucking, that's a full-blown adventure. The Fiat 634N V12 diesel wasn't just a truck. It was the granddaddy of diesel-powered legends. It showed what was possible when you crammed too much engine into too little time period. Sure, it was loud, clumsy, and probably broke down more than it should have, but it carried Europe on its back when no other truck could. The Fiat 634N was the OG heavy hauler, a diesel-powered dreamer that proved sometimes you gotta go big, even if the world ain't ready for it yet.
Number 1. I want to tell about one of the wildest, meanest, most overbuilt gasoline engines Uncle Sam ever rolled out of Detroit, the GMC 702 Twin 6. Now first off, let me just say this. America in the 1960s wasn't exactly about subtlety. We were sending astronauts to the moon, building muscle cars that ate tires for breakfast, and making sandwiches that could give a man a heart attack just by looking at them. And GMC, they took one look at all that horsepower fever and said, "Hold my beer, let's build a V12 truck engine." That's right, not a V8, not even a big block straight 6. A full-on 11.5-liter gasoline V12 for trucks, big rigs, fire engines, things that needed enough torque to pull a house off its foundation and still make it home for dinner. Here's the kicker. This monster was basically two GMC 351 V6 engines bolted together on a common crankshaft. Think about that. Engineers were like, "Hey, we already got a decent V6. Why don't we just take two of them, smash them together, and call it a day?" That's some real backyard barbecue engineering right there, and I absolutely love it. The result? About 275 horsepower and 625 pounds of torque. Now, before you muscle car fans start scoffing, remember, this wasn't about speed. This engine didn't care about your quarter-mile times, brother. The 702 was about pull-in power. It was built for trucks hauling concrete mixers, semi-trailers, and fire rigs that had to roar through the city at 3 a.m. like a pack of caffeinated lions. And let me tell you, when this thing fired up, it wasn't exactly quiet. Folks called it the Twin 6, but honestly, it should have been called the neighborhood alarm clock. When those 12 pistons lit up, you knew it. Dogs barked, kids woke up. Somewhere in the distance, a Chevy 283 V8 started crying because it felt inadequate. Now here's the funny part. It ran on gasoline, not diesel. Gasoline for an 11.5-liter V12? That meant it drank fuel like a college kid at happy hour. You didn't fill it up, you just kinda surrendered your wallet at the gas pump and prayed. Truckers used to joke that you could watch the gas gauge move while it idled. But durability? Oh, buddy, this thing was built to last. It didn't care if it was hauling rebar up a mountain, pulling a 40-ton load across Kansas, or pumping water for a fire truck all day. The GMC 702 just kept on chugging, like the Energizer Bunny if the bunny was juiced up on steroids and premium unleaded. And let's be real, the 702 had a swagger about it. American slang time, this engine was a straight-up baller. The kind of motor that walked into the truck stop, dropped his keys on the counter, and everyone just nodded like, "Yup, that's the dude." It wasn't pretty, it wasn't fancy, but man, it got respect. Now, did it last forever? Nah. By the early 1970s, diesel engines took over the heavy-duty market because they were way more efficient. The Twin 6 faded into legend, mostly remembered by truckers, mechanics, and firemen who had the honor and the fuel bills of running one. But here's the legacy. The GMC 702 Twin 6 proved that in America, when in doubt, just make it bigger, louder, and meaner. Forget efficiency, forget subtlety. Sometimes you just need an engine so outrageous it makes people laugh, cry, and cheer all at once. So next time you hear someone bragging about their little V12 Ferrari or Lamborghini, you just lean in and say, "That's cute.
But back in the 60s, GMC made a truck V12 the size of a sofa that could tow a mountain. Talk to me when your supercar can haul a cement mixer.